Welcome to Spiritual Musings of a Popcorn Brain.
Hi, I am Rachel Gardner, and today we are going to continue our discussion on Theophanies. And I have a lot of things that I've been thinking about and reading about since the last time we talked. So I hope you enjoy this. This is a little bit longer than my usual podcast, but if you're having fun, it'll fly in no time. So today I would like to continue in our discussion about theophanies. And a theophany is just a fancy word for God revealing himself in the flesh. And sometimes it's also called a Christophany or Christophany, which points out the fact that Christ is the one that you are seeing before he came down as a baby and lived among us as a human. So this is just for fun. You can agree or disagree. Some of the things that I'm going to point out, I'm going to leave it to you to decide whether or not it's an actual theophany based on our definition. So, because I think it's arguable, but these are still fun to think about, I think. So, we are going to start in Genesis 21, and I am using the New King James Version. And in Genesis 21, verses 17 through 18, it says, "And God heard the voice of the lad. Then the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, 'What ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation.' Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the lad to drink. So God was with the lad." And it goes on and talks about how God was with Ishmael. So this one's a debatable one for sure, but it says the angel of God. An angel means messenger, and the angel of God, when you see the angel of God or the angel of the Lord, I think you can make a very good argument that this is a theophany. And he calls to Hagar out of heaven. One of the cool things I think about this is this looks almost identical to Revelation, when I think it's in chapter 4, when basically it sounds like Jesus pokes his head through the clouds and tells John, "Come up here," right? Kind of like, "I've got some things I want to show you up here, so come here." So this is a lot like that. He just didn't tell Hagar to come on up because she had work to do, right? She needed to take care of her son. And then the next one I wanted to look at is in the next chapter, in Genesis 22, and in 11, starting in 11, it says, "But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, 'Abraham, Abraham.' So he said, 'Here I am.' And he said, 'Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him.'" So this is when God had called Abraham to sacrifice Isaac on an altar, which I'm sure had to be strange because Abraham was getting to know God, and God was not like false gods who demanded human sacrifice. And so we don't really know what's going through his head, except the author of Hebrews gives us an insight. And I don't know where this comes from, if this is what they believe that he was thinking, or if there was some story that was passed down through the generations. But it says that he reasoned that God could bring him back from the dead. So he didn't believe that even if he had to kill him, he was going to stay dead. He figured he would be resurrected, which is really cool in one sense because nobody had ever been resurrected yet. So where did he get that idea? Except that he's getting to know God, and he knows that God is all powerful. So why couldn't he if he wanted to. So when you continue on in that story, in verse 15, it says, "Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time out of heaven and said, 'By myself I have sworn, says the Lord.'" Okay. When you swear an oath, it needs to be to a higher power. To swear by yourself says that there is no higher power. So if the angel of the Lord says, "I swear by myself," that suggests that he knows or is saying that he is God. So this is both God and the angel of the Lord. Sounds a lot like the Trinity, right? Jesus is God. He said, "I and the Father are one." So, moving on. See, I think this is fun. Hopefully you agree. And if so, you're still watching. And if not, you've already moved on. So, Genesis chapter 31, starting in verse 11, it says, "Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, 'Jacob.' And I said, 'Here I am.' And he said, 'Lift up your eyes now.'" And he goes on and he's telling him these things about the payment and the goats and the sheep that he's getting from Laban, his father-in-law. Anyway, this is the angel of God, but he's speaking to him in a dream. So if you want to argue that that's not really him because it's not in the flesh, because it's a dream, fine. You can draw that line wherever you want. It's still Jesus, I believe, coming to him in a dream. So, let's see. Then when you get to 24, so this is after Jacob. Jacob has lived with his father-in-law for, I want to say 17 years. Anyway, it was well over 14 years. And his father-in-law is a scoundrel, which you could argue Jacob's one too. But scoundrels don't like each other usually, right? They're always trying to get the upper hand. So anyway, Jacob had his wives on board of leaving. So they snuck out and they left. And so when you get down here to verse 25, so Laban overtook Jacob. So he pursued him. Once he realized, oh my goodness, he's gone. He finally left. Then he hunts him down and he chases after him. He says, "What have you done that you have stolen away unknown to me and carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword?" So he's going on and on making his case of how could you do this to me? But then he says in verse 29, he says, "It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad.'" So, was this Jesus or was this God? It doesn't say specifically. It says the God of your father spoke to me. So I would say if he saw him in person, then you would have to argue it's Jesus, because in our earthly bodies, we can't see God. It would destroy us because the current makeup of ourselves just cannot handle his amazing glory. We deteriorate in that. I don't know if we'd evaporate or melt like it was a nuclear or atomic bomb. I don't know, but our bodies can't handle it, which is why when we are with him in eternity, we will have a new glorified body that can handle being in his presence. So anyway, that was another one just to consider. Then when you continue, we get into Exodus and Leviticus. So I'm going to go to Exodus 3, verse 2. "And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So this is when the burning bush is talking to Moses, right? And at first, it's like you get an inside look at God's thought process. I know that Moses is very curious, so I think I'm going to go make this bush look like it's burning, but it's not being consumed. And I'm pretty sure he's going to come check it out. And he did, because God knows us so well. So he did go check it out. And then the bush is talking to him. But if you recall, back here in verse 2, it was the angel of the Lord. But yet when it talks to him and you go through this story, in verse 14, and God said to Moses, I am who I am. So in this passage, it's going back and forth between saying the angel of the Lord and God. But both of them are saying I am, which is one of the amazing names of God that lets us know that he is outside of time. He's always been and he always will be. He wasn't created, so he has no beginning and he has no end. So everything he created does have a point in time when it began, and that's when time began. So anyway, that kind of thinking can mess you up if you're not ready for it. But I find this one interesting. This is not one where you are seeing the flesh, but he is talking to God, and it's interchanging angel of the Lord and God. So I believe he's talking to both God the Father and God the Son, just there's no flesh. So you decide what you want to call that. Then when we go to, let's just skip to Exodus 24. And we are going to go to verse 9. It says, Then Moses went up, also Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. Okay, so we have jumped really far forward. In all this time, God did the plagues on Egypt. God brought them out of Egypt. One thing that I skipped, because I'm going to kind of get to it here at the end, God showed himself in a cloud, a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. But it will interchange throughout Exodus, angel of the Lord, where God said, my angel will go before you. But then it also says that it's God. And when this cloud descends on the tabernacle, and it talks about how Moses spoke to him face to face. Well, was it really face to face, or was it like a face to face? Regardless of how you want to answer that, this is Moses talking to God the Father and or God the Son over and over and over again. And you can I think you could easily make an argument either way, but make sure that you don't argue meanly. Don't argue in such a way that you're going to turn someone off from believing in God because you're holding so strong to your viewpoint that you're not allowing this person to have the freedom to come to their conclusions and to know God personally. So anyway, this is one where Moses and Aaron and the elders, right, they go up and they see the God of Israel. And picking back up in verse 10, it says, And there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its clarity. So they see, it says, the God of Israel, but he has feet. So they're seeing him in human form. So this, I would argue, is Jesus. And when it talks about that paved work of sapphire stone, you see this again in Revelation, when John is talking to Jesus, and Jesus makes very clear that it's Jesus. And he's stepping on this sapphire pavement. Anyway, I think this stuff is really cool, but it can blow your mind. So, as I was talking about before, there was all these examples throughout Exodus of the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. And something that stood out to me recently, I'm going to jump to Mark. And this was today when I'm recording this video. My pastor had just, in my local congregation, he's been going through Mark. And so in Mark chapter 9, it records the transfiguration of Jesus, which is when you listen to the story, it's like Jesus is glowing. Okay, so in the Old Testament, when you see Moses' face glowing after he talked to God, this is the Shekinah glory of God that was either reflecting on Moses' face and back to the people, which totally freaked them out. Or in this case, this is Jesus who is glowing because he's in the presence of God. Because in this story, Jesus is talking to Moses and Elijah, which how they knew this was Moses and Elijah, we don't know, unless they were either overhearing the conversation, or if you take the idea that when we are someday in heaven, we will know each other. So I don't know. I don't know how that works, how they knew it was him, but he is in the presence of God, I believe, is why he's glowing. And why I think he's able to see Moses and Elijah, because they are, I think, at this point in the presence of God. I could be wrong about that, but that's just my thinking. And it doesn't say that specifically here, but Jesus is glowing. His Shekinah glory, either it's shining through because it cannot be suppressed, or he's in the very presence of God and it's reflecting off of him. We don't know exactly how that's working. But this is when Peter speaks up, and he's saying that they should make 3 tabernacles because he didn't know what to say. And then here's the thing that stood out to me. Verse 7, and a cloud came and overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son. Hear him." So this is going back to that idea, and why I don't know now. When you, in the Old Testament, when the pillar of cloud was there, was that God the Father or God the Son? Yes. It was God the Father or God the Son, and it's hard to say. In this instance right here, clearly it's God the Father in the cloud. But it's so amazing to me how the fact that you cannot pinpoint which one, I think, is part of the proof of the fact that Jesus and the Father are one. But we just don't understand that yet, not on this side. So, okay, now we're going to get to Numbers, jumping back to Old Testament here. Numbers 22. Now, this is cool, and I wanted to share this with you. I feel like God just gave me this insight. You can do with it what you will. But I saw something that I had not seen before, or if I had seen it before, I forgot about it and God showed me again, which is totally possible with my popcorn brain and my ADD. So this is the story of Balaam. So Balaam was this, I don't know if he was a prophet. He's not exactly a prophet of God necessarily when you look at what they said about him when they introduce him in Numbers. But he was known to be able to do extraordinary things, supernatural things. So I don't know if who Balaam was worshiping and what he was following. Because when you watch this too, he has a hard time coming around to the fact that God is God and you need to do what he says when he says to do it. You should not disobey. Anyway, he's very stubborn, but this is very, very interesting, and this is a long story. And so he was recruited by someone who wants to curse Israel. Now, I don't know if you've been following my podcast for long or if you've read your Old Testament before, but God has said in several places already, I will curse those who curse you, and I will bless those who bless you. And he made that promise to Jacob, who he renamed Israel, and to all of his descendants, who are known as the children of Israel. So the Israelites have just come out of Egypt. They are starting to conquer these nations that God had said, I will drive them out before you, because God was not with them. They were extremely wicked, and the Bible says that. And they are being judged as nations for their wickedness. And their time is at an end. God will only put up with wickedness for so long, and then he will judge that nation or that individual. In this case, he's judging nations by using the Israelites. And each time they start off being nice. These people don't want to be nice to them, and they want to fight them, but God is fighting their battles, and God is destroying and annihilating these nations. So one of the nations that they haven't quite reached, but they're getting closer, he's totally freaked out, and he goes and he hires this guy because he wants him to curse the Israelites, because I guess this guy has done things before and has a reputation that if he curses them, they'll be cursed. And he's warned not to go. So we get here and he is riding on a donkey, and he's following these guys that have been sent, these princes, rich men, titled, who have been sent to bring him back to this king who wants him to curse Israel. And when you get down, okay, so verse 13. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, go back to your land, for the Lord has refused to give me permission to go with you. So he tells them, I'm not supposed to go with you. Well, they go back, and then they come back with more money. Anyway, he ends up going with them because he wants the money, I'm guessing, and or the title or whatever. So let's see, we are looking now. So then Jesus is like, all right, fine, go with him. And I think this is Jesus. But it says in verse 20, and God came to Balaam at night. So this is in a dream. God speaks to him again. He says, you can go. He lets him go. But God's not happy that he went, because God had already told him you shouldn't go, but he is going. And we don't know exactly why it seems like God changed his mind, but we know that God is consistent and we know that God is righteous. My guess is he knows Balaam's heart, and Balaam is trying to figure out, most likely, how he can curse Israel. And anyway, well, we've already heard what God said he'll do to you if you go there. And so it says, then God's anger was aroused because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. And he was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. Now the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and the donkey turned aside. So Balaam gets mad, hits his donkey, like, get back on the road, because the donkey's trying to protect him. Then the angel stood in the narrow path between the vineyards with a wall on this side and a wall on that side. So remember that donkey can see the angel of the Lord, whom I believe is Jesus, is prepared to kill Balaam. And the donkey is trying to save Balaam. But this time, with the wall on either side, she rams him into the wall, and he gets so mad at her. And we only know this is a her because God, the Bible, is telling us it's a her. How else would we know that it's a female donkey? Anyway, so she pushed herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. And then the angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right or to the left. So this time she can't save him by going around the angel of the Lord. She can't protect Balaam. So she sits down in the road, and then he starts beating her to death. Okay, check this out. Then it says that then, in verse 28, then the angel of the Lord, then the Lord, it doesn't say the angel this time. It said it in verse 27. 28. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? Okay, so he opens her mouth. He lets her speak and plead her case. She's a donkey, and Balaam doesn't even realize that he's talking to a donkey at first. Then down in verse 31, then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his sword, with his drawn sword in his hand. And he bowed his head and fell flat on his face, because that is the response when you see God. You cannot help yourself. Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. And if you are ever in the presence of Almighty God, when there is judgment someday, you will not be able to help yourself. You cannot use your pride and your power to try to be defiant against God. You can't. It won't happen. So then, this is the other part. When you get down here, 32, and the angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to stand against you because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely I would also have killed you by now and let her live. He had respect for her love of Balaam as her caretaker, that he let him live for her sake. And why I'm crying over a donkey, I don't know, but this is what stood out to me this time. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed going through this with me. I enjoyed it. This is a bit longer of an episode, but I had fun. I hope you have fun and you enjoy going through this maybe more in depth, or that you see the Bible in a new way when you read it. Thank you for joining me today for Spiritual Musings of a Popcorn Brain, and I hope that you had fun, and I hope to see you back here next time. In the meantime, please like and subscribe and comment. These are the things that will get this channel noticed. If you appreciated it and you want others to be able to find it, that's what the algorithm looks for, is are people commenting and liking. Thanks.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe and share it with a friend. Thank you.